Covering the Universal Orlando Resort for over 5 years, you are listening to the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 227 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast. I'm your host Lee and this is part 2 of my What's It Like to Be a Universal Orlando Fan podcast documentary. On the last episode we heard from all our guests on when they first visited Universal Orlando Resort and what it was that initially attracted them to the resort as a whole. So this week we're going to find out a little bit more, so let's move on to this week's episode. Now, many of us know that Disney fan who keeps Disney in their lives 24/7. You've seen the documentaries, you know, The Dark Side of Disney, Dreamfinder, that type of stuff, that it literally has affected people's lives. Fundamentally, you know, from putting every spare penny towards another trip to see the mouse, to filling their homes with all manner of Disney knickknacks, to even putting every second of their spare time into producing fan content, such as blogs, podcasts, vlogs, you know, and other people, that it has become their job, their very existence. I myself spend more than my fair share of time producing the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. You know, it has become an obsession, and I struggle now to think what my life would be like without Universal Orlando in it. But little things as well, you know, I wear Universal clothes. I've said to all my guests when we've been chatting that I own 3 hoodies at this point, and they're all Universal Orlando themed. I have my morning tea on my way to work in my Halloween Horror Nights 25 Tervis. I have my nightly beverage in my Halloween Horror Nights 25 mug. You know, I have a tattoo. I have the Dark Mark from Harry Potter that was inspired by my love of Harry Potter, but also wanting something to embody Universal Orlando as well. But, you know, the music I listen to, I mean, one of the biggest things, and I'm sure you'll hear it from my guests now, is the people that I interact with on a daily basis, the friends that I have made through being a Universal Orlando fan. I can't go to Orlando without people wanting to meet up, or without us wanting to meet up with people we don't get to see anywhere near enough. We went out for Halloween Horror Nights 25 and we didn't go a single day without bumping into somebody at the parks that we knew. Now, I can go to my hometown and wander around for 3 hours and not see anybody I know. And that's a crazy thought to me. So the first question that I asked my guests this time round was, how has being a Universal Orlando fan affected your daily life? And we will begin again with Andy, Hate to Fly from Orlando United, Craig from the Disunplugged Universal, Derek from touringplans.com and the e-ticket report, and Taylor, the owner of Orlando Informer, to tell me how it affects them.
When I first got into this, when I first got, you know, into attractions and how they're made and the experience, Universal was much more relatable to me and to what I prefer in an attraction and a property revolving around that attraction. So I grew up. My parents, when I was young, I mean, it was like, we're going to Disneyland, you know, this is a major event in your life. And I love Disneyland. I love Disneyland much more than Walt Disney World, the shit show we got going on down here. Granted, we're finally going to get Avatar and Star Wars maybe in the next, 20 years, but yeah, who knows? But, you know, I love Disneyland and I love the experiences, but I wasn't so much like fascinated, and I had to figure out what was behind it, what was behind the curtain, or what was coming next, or what were the rumor mill was. Because back then, you know, the internet was in its early days, and you really couldn't gather this type of information. You know, even when I'm 10, 11 years old, you know, you AOL, ding, 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 you'd be lucky to get something. And it was something that I really started to try to focus in on and just gain as much knowledge as I possibly could. And the more knowledge I gained, the more I became fascinated with it. And the more fascinated I became, obviously, the more I want to go and I want to experience. And, you know, I've been a pass holder for Universal for, I don't even know, since the launch of IOA, and when you could get a pass for individual and or both. And Islands of Adventure was really the one, and I think this is relatable to a lot of people nowadays. Islands of Adventure is really the one that really changed the game as far as how we perceive and how we follow theme parks. To see something built from the ground up, as special as that park was, and as groundbreaking as that park was, there was a lot of fans that really jumped on at that point in Universal history. So as far as how it's changed my life, I think it's given me a lot more, what's the word I want to use? Respect for those who make these experiences come to life, as well as much more, me being a father now. I mean, I want to share those experiences with my kids when they get a little bit older, to see the wow in their face. I mean, I had nothing to do with building this stuff, and I'm still like, I want to see how they react. So as far as the total change, I mean, I would say complete fascination, total respect to those that create these amazing attractions, and as well as an increase in imagination. I mean, what else can you say for the people that create these, and they spark your own imagination? How many people that are listening to this right now have thought to themselves, you know, what I would give to create an attraction of my own and to see it come to life? So so many different ways it interacts with your daily life. Plus, you've got the whole, you know, people look at certain people online for tips and tricks, and following people. I've been in this for so long. I think I've kind of got a little bit of a reputation to try to help people out on their vacations, and as well as, you know, maybe a little bit of rumors here and there. Can neither confirm nor deny anything in my past. I love it, and it's had a fantastic effect on everyday life, everyday imagination.
Being a Universal fan affected my life drastically. I guess the first place I'll start with it is, if it wasn't for Universal Orlando, I would not be married to my wife right now. Without being an employee there and her working there too, I would have never met her, which is insane for me to think of. Just a couple of different decisions made in my life, and I probably would have never, ever met her. So that's the biggest thing that it affected. And then it just trickles down from there, thinking, yeah, I met my wife at Universal. Well, most of the people that were in our wedding actually were Universal employees too, because it was all our closest group of friends. Universal built these relationships in my life that I never expected to happen out of something that started off as a part-time job and turned into a full-time job. And, you know, I did outgrow working at Universal Orlando, but that was because I was giving a fantastic opportunity to end up working with the Diz. I had just come off of working at that point. I was at Universal for 2.5 years or so, and that was what I was living, breathing, eating. Like I was all about Universal. And so that's what ended up giving me the motivation to say, hey, we need to start looking into Universal as a serious, viable product. I know that, you know, my boss at the time, he had mixed opinions on the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and not necessarily, there were a lot of the people that I worked with weren't necessarily fans of Universal, and my passion for it just ended up transcending everything, and really got them all to look at Universal again. And, you know, now I've been hosting a podcast on it for years and constantly going and covering Universal, trying to write as much content as I can about it. I got lucky. I ended up having one job that I was able to take Universal, what I love so much, and it just fitted into it perfectly to create literally the dream job. You know, a couple of years before I really started working at Universal, that's whenever I first gave the Universal Classic Monsters a chance. And then once I was with Universal, that passion for Classic Monsters just multiplied a ton. And, now I'm constantly wearing my classic monster shirt year round that I got at Halloween Horror Nights. Even though sometimes I get weird looks from it. I can't not. I'm sitting here looking at Frankenstein on my desk, just staring right at me. For Halloween, I just carved a Frankenstein pumpkin. I love it. I once I attach onto something, I just go balls to the wall with it. I mean, if I turn my head left, I'm looking at my old Slytherin and Hufflepuff ties and my Dragon Challenge suspenders. So, it's just made me a freak. And I know people would judge me if they really saw how much I was into it. But luckily they mostly listen to me, so they don't get to see the full effect of it.
The biggest impact for me in the parks, and what probably the best part of the theme, more than rides and restaurants and hotels, is all the people I've come into contact and stay in contact with on a daily basis. And it kind of sounds cliche or trite, but it is. And it's whether I'm texting the guys at Parkscope for ideas of a blog I have coming up. I'm DMing Hate to Fly or Brian from Orlando United about Drew with football. Of course, I got Brandon, you got Meg. Greg, he's a great guy. I love talking to him. Angus, Brian Carey, Park blogger, podcast people. All these people are in my lives, and I interact with probably every day or definitely every week. And it's really solely because of Universal. I don't think any of them would be in my life at all if it wasn't for the theme park experience. So it's not even just going to the parks and having great fun with them, but it's just having them help me both professionally in terms of my blogging, great pictures by Brandon or Brian Carey, or even, Hate to Fly, Hunter Elverwood. You have some great, awesome photographers out there, and I think they make my work look good. So they're really helping me on a professional basis. And then personal basis, I just love having fun and interacting. I think I do a lot more tweeting and Facebooking with these people than I do real people in my life. My real friends and family, I don't think I have much in common, or at least I'm not as passionate about as I am with these people I've met solely thanks to Universal. Because if I was just going to Disney, I think I wouldn't have these type of people in my life. I'd have a lot of pixie dusters, and we'd have the Disney Christmas tree and all this kind of stuff. But I like that this group of people from Universal really keeps me more grounded, and they make me a better person. So they're great.
Universal Orlando has affected my daily life in just about every way imaginable. I've been extremely fortunate to turn it into a job, and then even later on, like a career. So in high school, I was able to join Orlando Informer and help out Dan at the time, who was the owner, run the website, and worked on opening the community forums, and then worked on managing the forums, and then worked as a writer, and then finally was able to take over the site when he had to move for family reasons. So I've been really fortunate to turn it into a career. Whereas every day I'm talking about what I love and talking about Universal Orlando and reporting on the news and the rumors, and every once in a while a price increase or something bad. But usually it's really fun stuff. It's usually like a new ride, or what they're thinking about, or some really cool opportunities, and have resulted from it.
Next up, I asked the ladies, Amanda Boston White from Dis After Dark on YouTube, Dani Dennison at This Florida Life on Twitter, Maureen from Autism at the Park, and of course, last but very much not least, my wife and course on the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast, Mrs. Tracey Mallaby.
It has introduced me to the most amazing people ever. I mean, I'm still really good friends with people that I met on a Universal forum like 10 years ago. And even quite recently, the people that I've been interacting with over the last few months, the kind of people that will message me about any videos that I might make around Universal, I'm just like, wow, I'm constantly surrounded by awesomely talented people that I can call my friends. And it's just made like a whole extra layer of fun to my life. And I'm having so much fun, and I love it. Even things like if a film's on, like if the Cat in the Hat's on, I'm like, well, I have to watch that because I like going on the rides. Or if Jaws is on, and I've seen Jaws a million bajillion times, I'm like, oh, hey, remember the Jaws ride? And we have to sit and watch it.
I don't necessarily have a bunch of memorabilia throughout my house. Of course, primarily what could fall into the Universal category would be the Harry Potter memorabilia that I have. But I will say, in an emotional way, it's affected my life because it's helped me to feel okay doing things that are outside my comfort zone. And that really started about 2-ish years ago. I know it sounds silly for so many people, but I went on Spider-Man for the first time, and that was actually quite an accomplishment for me. I get car sick if someone else is driving a car. I love flying, but I'm one of like the worst people to sit next to, because at takeoff and landing, I'm gripping onto the armrest, white knuckle grip. So I'm just, I'm not necessarily built for those crazy thrills and adventures, but doing that, I felt so much better. Like, okay, it's really not as bad as you think. And I call it kind of the gateway ride. It led me to try other things. And I went to Horror Nights for the first time last year. And I went again this year, much to my surprise, and had a great time. I did 5 houses when I really only expected to do 1. And so it's just, I think about those things sometimes where maybe something's happening at work where I'm nervous, or some sort of personal interaction in friendships or whatever the case may be. And I think, you know what? Okay, every time you've done a ride or an experience at Universal and you've built it up in your mind, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. And I honestly would not have that mindset were it not for Universal. Disney doesn't necessarily do that for me. There are some experiences there that do take some overcoming of fear, but it's much stronger at Universal. So it's given me courage, I would say.
Universal has, I'm trying to think of the right way of saying it, I've grown with Universal. At first, it was just going to Harry Potter section and doing some of the other things. But one of the most important things for us is taking my son Zachary, to a place that's welcoming. And Universal, the team members there, the attractions interest him. He loves them. He's a coaster junkie. The faster, the more intense, the better for him. And it's such a welcoming place for my son, which in turn means we're welcome. And he's always happy when he's there. He loves the parades. He used to ride Rip Ride Rocket 6 times in a row. He loves anything, any interaction. And I became more and more knowledgeable about the park. And when I started my website, I wanted to cover not just Disney, but I wanted to cover Universal for those people who have a family member with autism. They want to learn about Universal and things that might impact their travel or their experience there for their child with autism. I just grew to love it even more and more and learned all the ins and outs. And then they were building different things. The Minions was one of the first things they were building after I started going regularly. It's been great. The impact for my daily life, it's my business now, is my website, and connecting with people and giving them the information. I've been privileged enough to meet people because of Universal, other fans. I've been, honored to be asked to report for the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast, and that was thrilling for me. And it's definitely something that our whole family can enjoy together. There's not a lot of things that, because of my son's limitations, that we can enjoy together, but Universal really has enhanced our lives as a family. And we just really enjoy it as a family.
So apart from mentally wandering around the parks when I need to decompress or just want to remember things, humming little tunes or listen to the soundtrack in the car, aside from that sort of stuff, how it's affected me is interactions with other people, but the fact that I now have an extended family. I feel I have more family in Orlando than I do in this country. And those people, as I say, they're not friends, they are family. They are more important to me than many people over here. I'm really sorry if that upsets anybody. But we have really, really close relationships with Hunter and Darren, and of course Nina and Kim. But there's so many more other people. It costs me a fortune in Christmas cards, sending them over there. But it's worth it because it's just letting them know how much we love them and appreciate them. And that's a really big part of what I've taken from it and how it affects me. I suppose the biggest way it affects me is every time I get changed or take a shower, I have the biggest reminder because I have a Dr. Seuss sleeve. And in 2004, when we first visited, I was already aware of Dr. Seuss. I liked a few of the little things because it wasn't big over here. And I completely fell in love with everything that Dr. Seuss had to offer. So, of course, I now have a full sleeve tattoo. And that's probably the biggest way it's affected my daily life. And of course, you can't forget the podcast, can you? Because, let's face it, we're working on that all the time, and it is a lot of fun to do. And the interactions are amazing. I'm pretty sure that the fact that we have that in common, and that's all we talk about, literally date night, that's all we talk about. I think without the conversation that we have daily about the podcast, we maybe wouldn't even have a marriage.
Next up brings us to the rest of the UUOP and Dead Man's Digest crew. So Darren, Hunter, Nina and Travis, and I asked them the same question, which was, how has being a Universal Orlando fan affected your daily life?
Well, being a Universal fan has affected me in several ways. I wake up in the morning and I pour my coffee into my Jack mug. I sit down at my desk, which is covered with Jack the Clown, Halloween Horror Nights things, Back to the Future things. I look back at my bookshelf behind me, at my whole entire bookshelf full of either souvenirs from the park or things that were based on movies that I saw the rides, at the park at the same time. Pretty much my entire life is totally surrounded by Universal. You go on my phone, my wallpaper is Universal. You look at my Twitter account, and every post on my Twitter account is about Universal. It really has become like an all-consuming thing for me. I do, of course, try to, get out and branch out into other things, but I'm always drawn back to Universal and being a fan of it. I would not have joined this podcast if I didn't already have a love for Universal. I wouldn't have been listening in the first place. I wouldn't have met the friends that I've made. I wouldn't have found my girlfriend, the love of my life. I would not have done that without Universal Studios. And day to day, I'm constantly reminded of that. Like I said, with the actual things that are around me, the people that I talk to, just every aspect of my life is touched almost constantly. And of course, if the day isn't actually at Universal, it's planning the next trip there. So,
being a Universal fan, it really comes back to this show, and it really comes back to, I'm very, very grateful for the friendships and the relationships that I've been able to form thanks to being on the UUOP. And a lot of that, it all ties in together. I always say I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to theme parks. I'm as much of a fan of Universal as I am with other theme parks, but there's that balance there. There's the yin and the yang where I can appreciate both equally. But as far as how it's affected my personal life, once again, it really comes down to all the wonderful relationships and friendships I've been able to make because of doing the show in particular. And I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I've had to meet, listeners of the show and just fans of the property. And I definitely don't think I would be who I am socially today without the podcast. So I'm very, very grateful. And, the podcast did a lot for me personally as far as bringing me out of my shell and developing my personality. So very, very grateful for the opportunity to do that. And I'm grateful to Universal for giving me the potential to do that.
It's completely taken over. Every morning I grab my Minion or Spider-Man mug or my Jack 25 Years Horror Nights mug. I go to work. I work in a doctor's office, but I talk about Universal all day. And patients ask me, hey, what about Universal do you like? Oh, let me tell you. And I'm like, I just sponsor Universal everywhere I go. My clothes, all my clothes are Universal clothes. The decorations in our house, we have the posters from all our favorite Universal movies. We have, so it's not even just the merchandise, it's what we listen to, what we talk about. Darren and I will spend hours on end on YouTube doing ride walkthroughs and just queue line walkthroughs on YouTube on our weekends and our free time when we're not there at the parks. It's just something that brings so much joy that you just never want it to end, and you just want to be in that world when you're at home, just trying to survive. You just want to be there all the time because it just, brings us so much happiness.
I think the biggest way that Universal has affected my daily life would be, first and foremost, probably just all the friends that I've made over the past years, just interacting on whether it be Twitter or the biggest thing was I met a lot of people through my photography of going to the parks and photography, taking pictures of the parks, people inside, and just interacting with those people online, seeing whether or not it be on their Instagram or their Twitter that they posted up. and just, talking to them and meeting up with them in the parks because of a common thread between us, just being theme parks and Universal. It also affects my daily life from day to day, just what I'm going to do on a daily basis, whether or not I want to go to the parks or do something else. Because I do go, I am a local, so I go a lot, even down to some of the stuff I wear. I mean, I got Universal t-shirts, Halloween Horror Nights stuff, and I think that's pretty much how it's affected my daily life.
And finally, the fans, Brandon, Mackenzie, Thomas and Trevor all answered the same question.
Well, I think the fact that, it's really kind of, if you know me on Twitter and offline, then you see that, my daily life has become theme parks and, more. I do podcasts. I do photography, obviously, if I can throw a plug in for touringplans.com. I do a lot of photos for them, and we go to the parks all the time, and I'm trying these new foods. I'm trying, drinks. I'm taking photos of the parades and all the various things like horror nights and such. And, actually, that's another good point right there. I'll say my daily life during horror nights is I'm in the parks every night. I'm in horror nights. You'll find me there either at Finnegan's or at the new Hello Kitty spot trying to get into a house, or running around the streets getting photos, things that I used to do just, every once in a while. But now it's like I'm always there. I'm constantly there. That's become part of my life now, is going to a park and going to Universal and taking all the, taking photos or trying drinks or doing it, anything, whatever comes up. And I will say, another thing is, like, obviously with the podcast, and I want to mention one of the first things I ever did for a podcast, I think, was, we were on a Universal show. And then I remember early on in your run, you actually had asked me to record something for you. So I recorded live in the park. And it's funny now, we're recording here over Skype or audio, the Google Hangouts, whatever. But I had my iPhone back then, and it was just, I went to one of the craziest spots in the park I could find that had some kind of audio. I was like, I'm going to just record. And it was probably terrible sounding because, I'm not so great on audio, but I just remember recording something and sending it into, it was like maybe 15, 20 seconds long. And it was really cool. I was really glad to do that. It was awesome. And, it's still today I do podcast, The Park Blogger with Angus, who I actually met for the first time at your meetup. And it's funny, we still laugh because we were sitting next to each other in the Men in Black car, but we really didn't like hang out or talk much. We just kind of said, oh, hey, how's it going? Let's kill some aliens, and then now we're good buddies and hang out every time he comes down. So that's another thing that's affected my daily life from, Universal and being a part of the Universal fan community is I've made all these new friends, and, obviously some of them become like family. So it's really, really great that this has been, a part of my life. And I have Universal to thank for that. Disney as well, but, Universal is a big part of it.
Being a Universal fan has definitely affected my wardrobe. I probably my mission is to own every single shirt inside of the Universal Park, starting with the Terminator shop. It's not a huge fan favorite, but it's my favorite. And I own every single shirt inside of there except for one. If Universal sold jeans, then my entire closet could be supplied by Universal Studios. But I mean, it's even like, for me, that's such a little thing that it's affected, whereas it's affected my entire family on such a monumental level of literally us wanting to move there. I mean, that is how we see our lives, that is the only thing, that's what's waiting for us. That's where we want to be. That's where we want to work. It's not just a vacation spot, and it's not just a place you want to go and escape to. We want to spend every single second of our lives in that park, and even like helping the park becoming better. We want to be Universal.
Well, the Universal Orlando resorts down there, I have nothing but happy memories. There's not one single bad memory I have. And I think it's very important for your daily life to surround yourself with so much positivity and things that make you happy and things that make you smile. So for my daily life, I would say that I live majority of the life in my house. So if you were to come into my house, there'll be things about Universal Studios Orlando all over my house. You'll see movie posters, you'll see props, you'll see little toys, you'll see pamphlets and books and maps. And so you walk into my house, it's like wow, this guy likes Universal Studios Florida. And so that is one thing that I see every day of my life. Another thing is when I take a shower, I have a little Universal music playlist that I press play, and I hear like all of the great soundtracks that Universal plays. And another thing is I have friends that are not in the know, knowledge-wise, about Universal Studios Orlando and the theme parks down there, and they come to me first before they go online. They're like, hey, I know you like Universal. Can you give me some tips? Can you give me some guides? What hotel should I go to? What's an express pass? And which is the best park if I have a child who's 11 years old? And they're coming to me to ask all these questions, and because they know that I just love Universal so much. And I have great pleasure in converting some people into Universal, and once they go, they're like, oh my God, it was the best time of my life. And that's what gives me some great appreciation in the fact that they enjoyed all that. And also my daily life, I have so many Facebook friends and all that are in the community, and I call it a family. So we keep up to date, and whenever they see something that I would enjoy or something, they would text me a picture saying, hey Thomas, this is new at Universal. I thought you might like this. And we keep in touch like that. So I constantly get these messages or tags and all that, and that also keeps me up to date daily.
Crazy enough, my life as it's been affected by Universal is similar to many others that are now like obsessed with Universal Orlando. I wear certain clothes that have the Universal insignia on them. Those Nike polos, I tell you what, absolutely incredible. They are so nice. I wear those all the time if possible. Has the little Universal branded logo on the left side, and I love those shirts. Listen to the music when I'm processing photos. Islands of Adventure, the Port of Entry song, the soundtrack inside of the Port of Entry, I absolutely love the song or songs. I'm not sure if it's 2 different songs, 3 different songs, 1 entire song, but I absolutely love that music. And processing photos, for me anyways, it's very relaxing, and it gets me going and actually makes me work a little faster, but at the same time focusing on detail. And I just love that aspect of Islands of Adventure. Just the music that they play throughout is incredible. As well as just affecting my life by meeting friends and people who love similar things. One person, Travis, he is an absolutely nice guy. Met him through Universal Photography. I also met one of my friends, Mike. We met, I think, at Islands of Adventure, taking photos. A few other people, Jack and Brian, people that I've just met through Universal that are now pretty good friends. Just like some other people that I know, they have more friends now through theme parks than they do outside of theme parks. It's really weird, but that's how much it's affected me, because I love going to the parks, love taking photos, and if my friends don't like doing the same thing, like how do we get along? How do we share any common interests? So it's really affected me in that sense as well. Like my friends, they enjoy theme parks specifically because I like to go to both parks, Universal. So it is quite the experience. I never thought 2 years ago, graduating high school, I never thought that in 2 years, my entire circle of friends would change and I would be going to the theme parks and investing as much time as I have already in them. It's a lot of fun. It's somewhere where you can go and forget about all of the stress of today or any crazy things happening in the world. You just go there and you relax. And that's why I love it so much.
So as you can see from all those answers, it literally has invaded every part of those lives, from Taylor, it literally being his job now, to Brandon spending most of his time there with friends, and I think the biggest thing that come out from that question is it is friends, it is that family, that theme park family that everybody has gathered from their time visiting the resort. And I think that's the biggest thing for for me personally. Yeah, I love the resort, I love visiting it, but it's like going home to visit your family that you've moved away and you haven't seen for so long. It's crazy, and it's brilliant. It really is. It's just unfortunate I don't get to go back as much as we would like, but that's why the internet was invented, I think. Now, Universal Orlando Resort is arguably the second biggest resort in Orlando, but in growth alone, it is by far the biggest resort there at the moment. Disney could only hope to grow as much as Universal is at the moment, and this isn't about bashing Disney, but it has created a theme park war between Universal and Disney, and I know they say there isn't, but that war spilled over into the fan community too. Now, we all hear Disney fans bashing Universal's overuse of screens. I mean, hell, we even do it ourselves at times. But we also hear those Universal fans berating Disney for not building new attractions, or if they do, taking forever to finish projects. And this battle will always be there, and whatever the outcome, we as the guest, we're the big winners. But it did make me want to ask another question. Which is better, Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World? But that's not the question I ask my guests, because that is a personal preference at the end of the day. I, unashamedly, am a Universal fanboy. I will not hide that fact. I like Disney, I love Universal. I used to love both equally, if not a little bit more in favour of Walt Disney World if I'm honest, but we fell out of love with the House of Mouse back in 2013. But my fandom of Universal has grown even more. Having visited Orlando in 2013 for 3 weeks, we fell out of love with Disney a little bit and grew so much more in love with Universal. So to me, Universal, it speaks more to the inner child in me. Everything in that resort feels like it was built for me personally. Harry Potter, Transformers, The Simpsons, Terminator, Marvel. It speaks to everything pop culture that I love. Halloween Horror Nights. I'm a huge scare attraction fan. Halloween Horror Nights is amazing. It's like someone said, we're going to build this resort for Lee, what shall we put in? And then put in everything I love. But there's also many other reasons why I prefer Universal, not just down to the IPs and the rides itself. But that's not what this section's about. The question I did want to ask my guests next, though, was, speaking solely to the Universal Orlando fan part of them, because we know a lot of them love both, what is it that makes Universal Orlando stand out above Walt Disney? So we're going to hear from everyone in the same order that you heard them before.
It's a very give and take and touchy, and it's a feud. It's never going to stop. It's always going to be Disney versus Universal, Universal versus Disney. Disney, you get free water at the water machine, but at Universal you have to, whatever the case is. There's always going to be every single thing, especially when you live in Orlando. It's amazing how much things are really blown out of proportion when you put the two resorts up against each other. Now, I do quite enjoy theme parks in general. I really liked. I much prefer Disneyland than I do Walt Disney World. I like Universal's urban type centralized layout. I can walk to everything, so to speak. City walk, both theme parks. I can go to any hotel via foot or one of the boats or a bus, and I can be there within 10, 12 minutes. Disney World is much more spread out. It's kind of it's a little inconvenient, especially if you have children. So when it comes to layout, I much prefer Universal. When it comes to rides, I much prefer Universal. It's much more aimed towards my demographic and my taste. Now, I could see those who are not one for motion simulators and the current trend that Universal is going along. They're not catering to those people that don't do motion simulators. So at least in recent years. So I could understand where there'd be a few people that are like, rides, yeah, they're cooler, but they don't really aim towards what I enjoy. If you have kids, Disney is, more kid friendly, especially with really young kids. Now, that's not what Universal is going for. So again, doesn't bother me. I mean, I have little kids, but they have fun at Universal. Regardless, they're gonna have a good time. As far as operations is concerned, I think that is where Universal needs to up their game. and I'm not talking about cast members, and I can't speak for the last year, and I can't speak for every cast member, and I can't speak for every team member at Universal. The attitudes, generally speaking, are much more pleasant at Universal. But with that being said, when it comes down to guest services, resolving a problem, Disney has the mentality of, we're going to take care of it. And regardless of the situation, we've got this taken care of. And Universal, as much as I love them, a lot of times, there's a little bit of, there's a gray area in there. It really depends on who you get. One manager is the greatest. The next manager, not so good. And it really interferes with the experience that you get at Universal. And that's what I hope that they improve upon, is their customer service skills from the grand point of view. I can't speak for individuals or anything like that, because for the most part, most team members you encounter are great. But when it comes down to the grand experience, if you're going to go Walt Disney versus Universal, Walt Disney has better overall customer service. As far as operations are concerned, I'd also have to give the nod to Walt Disney. But again, they've been in business for a long time. They are much more used to these gigantic crowds. Universal has really only experienced these massive crowds over the last 5 to 5.5 years. So they have learned a tremendous amount in the last 5.5 years. You take operations 5 years ago at Universal versus operations present day, it's night and day. The amount of change, it used to be a shit show. It really was. Universal had its dark days, and we all very well know that. If you went to Universal between 2006 and 2009, you could walk through in August and look around and you'd be the only damn person there. Okay. It was bad. They went through some rough times, and they're making huge improvements. So you have to give a little bit. It's a little bit of give and take. There's some things that Universal does great, and there's some things that Disney does great. Rides, Universal, Disney, customer service operations. But with that being said, again, Universal's come a long way.
The thing that makes Universal Orlando stand out above Walt Disney World, for me, it just first and foremost, the immersion. I walk into Universal Orlando and I am just transported away. And I know people say that they do the same thing whenever they walk through the Magic Kingdom. But for Universal, I get it no matter where I am. From the second I walk into City Walk, you are right there in it. Go into the studios. Again, you're there. Islands of Adventure, even more, just because of how great of a job they've done just pulling you into all of those lands. There is literally not an area that I feel like I'm not fully into this different world. And that even translates to the Lowe's hotels on property. They all click for me in ways that I don't think Walt Disney World does throughout it. I think they want to. I think that's their intention. They just don't. Then the next aspect is, I'll kind of say it. I'm over the past couple of years, the dining and drinks have gotten far, far better at Universal than they are over at Walt Disney World. Twosome Chocolate Emporium in Savory Feast Kitchen just opened up. And I don't think I go 2 days without saying Twosome, which is very bizarre to me, because I must seem like I have a problem, but I'm just constantly thinking about Twosome. NBC Sports Grill and Brew, always on my mind. Cowfish. I love everything that they've really added into City Walk, but then going in the parks and having that experience of eating at the Leaky Cauldron and going to Fast Food Boulevard in Springfield, and then having these beers that are crafted specifically for Universal, something that Disney just doesn't do either. I know they're trying to catch up in that now and get on that level, but they're still behind on that. those are the things that make Universal stand out to me. I feel like Universal is constantly innovating. They're constantly trying to one up themselves. Yeah, they're using screens to do a lot of the innovating, but I don't care what tools they have to use to take everything to the next level. It's as long as they don't settle and they want to take it to the next level. They want to take their dining to the next level, attractions, the hotels. I really don't care. And heck, we already, I don't want to date this, but just finding out more details about the Krakatoa Aqua Racer coming to Volcano Bay today. Innovating with that too. It's Universal just is constantly pushing the boundaries, and that's something that Walt Disney World just isn't doing anymore. I would slap you if you said that Seven Dwarfs Mine Train was pushing the boundaries on anything, innovating new technology, and really when it comes down to it, that's why Universal Orlando is standing out, is the better.
What I like to use as examples is like other hobbies or other forms of entertainment that you like. And one thing I love is comic books. I also love TV. And most of us who read comic books start off with things like Archie comic books. And over here, they're like in all the supermarkets and stuff like that. So you start off young and you start reading those. And then when you get older, you mature, quote unquote mature. And there's Superman, there's Batman, there's a superhero universe. And people get into them for a while. A lot of people stop reading comic books. But if they stay, they realize there's a whole bunch of other comic books that are written for adults, young teens, young adults, mature adults. There's a whole line of comic books that aren't aged or aren't written towards kids. They're mature themes. You could even say The Walking Dead is semi like that. It's not written for a kid reading Archie comic books. The comics kind of grow up with you, and you tend to gravitate towards more adult themed books, more complex stories. And on TV, we start watching cartoons, we start watching Nickelodeon, and then later on we realize there's more TV, more adult when you start going to the major channels for us. And then you get up to like HBO with like Games of Thrones and Westworld, these really complex and intricate shows. And I think it'd be weird if you were a 40-year-old adult with no kids who likes comic books and you're just reading Archie after 30 years, that you didn't make that leap to see that there's other competition out there trying to get just you. They're not trying to get that young audience, or at least as much. They're really writing to you and your sensibilities and how you grew up. And Disney's great, and Disney has made a choice in the last several years that the market they're going to go after is young kids, and I don't blame them. There's a lot of money in that market. But what's strange is that there's people, especially with no kids, who don't even want to give it, a Universal or even a Busch Gardens or SeaWorld a chance. They're in this Disney bubble, not realizing that these other theme parks, and especially Universal right now, are targeting what they like as young adults, as teenagers, as 30 and 40-year-old men. They're getting these properties like the Fast and the Furious, like Harry Potter. I mean, these are things that are literally blowing up in the pop culture world outside of theme parks. They're creating these experiences to enjoy, and there's a big segment of a Disney audience which won't ever even try. And I think that's uniquely to Disney audiences. I think if you saw a Venn diagram of Universal fans and Universal pass holders, almost all of them are also Disney pass holders or go to Disney. Whereas if you go over to Disney pass holders, not many of them are Universal pass holders, and a huge percentage will never even give Universal a chance. And I find that's just a very strange mentality to be in, that you just have this automatic block that there's no way I'm going to like anything over there. I'm going to judge it all by YouTube videos and by forum comments. And I think that's uniquely, unfortunately, Disney. I think thankfully for Universal and Busch Gardens and Cedar Fair, I think those people are theme park fans and amusement park fans, and they give everything a chance and realize what's good for them and what is great. And unfortunately, Disney doesn't. So I like that Universal caters towards me. When we just finished up Halloween Horror Nights back in October or even into November, and that is a strictly non-for-kids thing, whereas we go with our family to Mickey's Not So Scary, and it's great that they can enjoy everything. It's a really dumbed-down, banal, almost, Halloween experience for an adult. But the kids love it, and that's awesome, being able to live my life through them and see it through their eyes. I like going to Halloween Horror Nights where they're targeting me, and they are trying to give me a sense of thrill that Disney just can't do. You can't really thrill an 8-year-old and a 28-year-old. It's impossible. You have too many life experiences. We're too jaded. We've been through too much. We need that a little thrill. I'm trying to think of another word for that. In our excitement in our lives, the kids just can't take. So I like that Universal gives us that, and Disney just can't right now or chooses not to.
I get asked pretty frequently, what makes Universal better than Disney, in my opinion, or why I visit Universal more frequently, or questions like that. And it's probably a result of running a large Universal website, and everybody's like, well, why don't you include more Disney stuff? And really, what it comes down to me is I try not to spend money or large amounts of money at businesses that don't invest back into their customers. So at businesses that aren't spending at least a portion of the money that I'm giving them to invest back into the customer. And not to say Disney never does that, but to me, it's always felt like Universal does that more. Even in the dark days, I felt like Universal was, taking that money and at least putting it back into the park to a lesser extent than now, of course, where I feel like now, with the enhancements every year, it really feels like they value my business, and they're taking my business to grow more, whereas Disney kind of just feels like they're grabbing my money and stealing it from me.
Well, I do enjoy both, but I think they're two totally different experiences. I see Universal as like the cooler park, and even though I find it more chilled out, I think Universal always seem to take it that step further. They have the most immersive attractions that I've ever seen. And then growing up with things like loving classic Universal Monsters films and Back to the Future and Beetlejuice, I loved being a part of that. And plus, I'm crazy about Halloween Horror Nights, and Disney don't have that.
They are kind of the underdog. They've been the underdog for so long, and they definitely showed the world what they can do and what they're made of when Hogsmeade Village at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter opened. But now there's become this new phase where, okay, yes, we've got Hogsmeade Village, we've got Diagon Alley, but we can't rest just on those two incredible Harry Potter areas. So Reign of Kong, came out, and I know a lot of folks maybe have expressed some disappointment. They were hoping there'd be a little bit more to the ride, but I absolutely love it. I think the queue is amazing. Starting off the ride outside and then going inside is great. I just love the detail, and it's just the right amount of thrill for someone like me, where there doesn't have to be this huge mental buildup in my mind to get through it. It's really not a big a deal. And so I think Universal has that mindset of we continually have to prove ourselves. I remember actually in college, I went to hospitality management school just down the road. It's here in Orlando, in the heart of the attractions area. And I was taking theme park management. I won't say how long ago, very long ago. And an executive for Universal came in and someone asked, do you think you'll ever surpass Disney? And he said, we'll never surpass Magic Kingdom. That's never going to happen. But we will, and we can take their market share. And they've done that. And they continue. They understand they've got big competition down the road, and they've got to keep things fresh and exciting and innovative. And I do think they do that a lot more than Disney does.
I would say that Universal offers such unique experiences that sets it apart from Disney. I'm a big Disney fan myself too, but Universal just has some of the things that are so unique, not just including the Harry Potter sections and the details that go into how everything you see there. I go there at least once a month, and I see something different each time. I love the different attractions that they have. Transformers, I could ride that all the time. Men in Black. I'm not a big coaster fan, but I will ride Mummy every once in a while if they get me on there. But it's just so unique. The connections between the attractions and the films that a lot of them are based on. I really like that. For my son with autism, It is more accommodating for him in general to go to Universal. They're more willing to give him extra service or extra care. All the team members have been wonderful to him, and we haven't had bad experiences at Disney, but Universal, I've talked with a lot of other families, and they seem it's less stressful. You don't have to schedule your day ahead of time. You don't have to worry about, will your pass be accepted at this attraction or that attraction? And so if my son's less stressed when he's at Universal, which really makes it a better experience overall than Disney at times.
Well, as I touched on before, the Universal parks are a bit more grown up. They're aimed at the older families rather than the younger families, which Disney is aimed at. They have the more intense rides. They have the themes that I love, walking around and just realising that something I've walked past 100 times at a window, so with a sign right on the window, suddenly all of a sudden means something to me. It's things like that, if that makes sense. It just feels more like home. I think because it's not as kiddified, I don't know if it's the right way to put it, it takes itself a little bit more seriously. And of course, it has Halloween Horror Nights, doesn't it? Which is a lot scarier than Mickey's Not So Scary, which I've never done, but I like to be scared a bit. I like things that are edgy. And I think that's what it is with Universal. It's edgier.
The thing that puts Universal over Disney for me is it's just not as much of a headache. It's not as much of a hassle to go to Universal. Every time I go to Disney, it's a mission. But especially when Nina was living in Orlando and we had a lot of time up there, Universal was like hey, we got a couple hours free in the afternoon. What do you want to do? Oh, let's go to Universal. Like, it was totally feasible to do that. It's easy to park and get in and do that, but then also on top of just being easier to get to and access and that kind of thing, is that it was always geared more towards me. Disney, I do love Disney. I love the cartoons and the movies and everything that they've produced, and the park itself, Haunted Mansion, is I will always say is one of my favorite theme park attractions ever. In any park, including Universal. But that is the one thing that's geared towards me there. At Universal, just about everything is geared towards me. I am interested and I enjoy almost every ride and attraction there. You've got things like, the Terminator, you've got, The Simpsons now, what used to be the Back to the Future, Men in Black. You've got all these different attractions and things that are geared towards my thrill level for a park. And I've always been a big fan of coasters, thrill rides, that kind of thing as well. And I just think that Universal does those things a lot better than Disney possibly could, because they have their finger on a different pulse than Disney does. And I think that's really what really makes it stand out above Disney for me. And also at the same time too, for some reason, I know they're both big corporations, that run both these parks, but there's something that feels a little bit more like family at Universal for me. I don't know if it's just the amount of time that I've spent there, the fact that I see the same people working at the same stores over and over again to the point where they'll actually recognize me, and that kind of thing. It just makes a big difference to me personally with just how it feels like on a smaller scale a little bit, but at the same time the rides seem like they're on a grander scale, if that makes any sense.
I think it's how theatrical the whole park is. When I think of Universal, I'm thinking of very, very special experiences that might be frightening or thrilling. I get, a very homey, comfortable feeling when I'm at Walt Disney World. And, that partially has to do with me being a cast member. But when I'm at Universal, I actually feel more at home and more comfortable than Walt Disney World. Now, that's because I visited as many times as I have, of course. But I think it also comes down to I know the parks like the back of my hand. And I am so grateful that there are still new things for me to experience. Like we were talking not too long ago, this is only my second year of doing Halloween Horror Nights, and that's a fresh, brand new way for me to experience these parks I know like the back of my hand every single year. So Universal, I think, is constantly reinventing themselves, and they're constantly putting out new stuff that makes me want to revisit the parks. While I think Disney, as much as I love it, can be very stagnant at times.
Less strollers. No, I'm just kidding. It's a different environment. Disney has, it's the magical, and it's a fairy tale, and anything is possible, and you just feel like you've tapped into the young side of, those memories of just there's no problems in the world, everything is resolved, you just need to be here. Universal, on the other hand, it gives me the thrill, the excitement. It makes me escape life, sort of like Disney does, but except I'm escaping to a movie, or I just feel like the excitement, the cool factor of being on a set of a movie, and you feel like you're walking through New York, or you're in the movie E.T. or whatever it may be. It's just something Universal. It is different in a way where they can't survive without the other. When I'm at Disney, I miss Universal, and when I'm at Universal, sometimes there's something about Disney I do miss as well. But Universal just has that extra. What I need, just the excitement, the more thrilling rides, and that aspect of movies that I enjoy.
One of the reasons I can see Universal standing above Disney in an aspect would be just the thrill, more adult nature of the park in general. You can go there and you don't necessarily have to wear, obviously they've got more thrilling stuff to do. It's more of a teenager to adult theme park, because obviously you have more of the ride height restrictions. So just the thing about it just strikes me more as an adult park. I feel like I can be a little bit more of an adult there, where Disney is more oriented towards children and stuff like that, which I don't necessarily mind that, but I don't feel like I want to do that all the time. Sometimes I want to be in these more adult thrilling rides, and because obviously I don't have any children right now. That may change when I get older. Yeah, the main factor is just you can be more of an adult at Universal. I think the rides are more thrilling. They're a lot more fun. There's more places for you to, if you want to get an adult beverage or that sort, you can do that. So I think that's probably one of my biggest reasons that Universal stands out in that aspect, is just because of the more adult thrill aspect to me.
What makes Universal stand above Disney? Well, for one, and I will say I do enjoy both equally, and I know people are probably going to say, how is that possible? But it is possible. I do enjoy both of them. But for me, for what Universal brings to the table more for me is, I've mentioned Horror Nights. I think that's one of the best events anyone puts on. They really do a great job of putting you into the scenes and make you feel like you're actually part of this. The Walking Dead, for example, or The Exorcist, you feel like you're in these movies, and they really bring out the best of their abilities in these. And I think, Horror Nights is just one of the best events going. Obviously the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and Springfield, these are two areas that I really frequent when I'm in the parks. And that's probably usually where I hang out, because they make you feel like you're part of the story. They put you in there, and Diagon, you just have this, you could spend the whole day in there just walking around, exploring, enjoying the drinks and the food and the rides. There's just so much to do. And I think for now, that's the best thing to going in the parks there at Universal. And I think that's what I would put Universal ahead of Disney for, is those experiences.
Let's see. Walt Disney World to me has never been something that I've ever seen or had an interest in. I've never seen the allure. I've never seen why people love it so much. To me, Disney seems repetitive. It just seems like it's almost there purely for the nostalgia. I feel like they are stuck in time. They don't really move forward. They just kind of keep with what they know people want, and it's almost like a security blanket. Universal is edgy with all these great new storylines and cutting edge technology. Universal just entices you to come back to experience something new every single time. And that's what's so great about it. It's constantly changing, and as you grow up with it and as it grows with you, in a sense of, instead of staying as a child and reverting back to being a child, you can enjoy it no matter what age you are.
For me personally, it's being familiar with my surroundings. I think Universal is very easy to navigate. from getting off the plane at MCO to get into a taxi to go into one of the resort hotels like Royal Pacific, to getting your express pass made, to putting your luggage there, to go into the parks. That's right there, 10 minutes away. I think it's just an easy routine that I've become accustomed to. It's simple, and it's less crowded, I would say, and I'm surrounded by more grown-ups. And I've been to Walt Disney World only one time, that was back in 2011, and I've been to Disneyland in 2013. Just from 2011, talking about Walt Disney World, when I was there, it was so massive. It was like a big city that you practically had to like ride a train to each city. And it just became very complicated. And the lines were just too long. And I know Disney is more geared toward more kids and all that. And it was too much. I felt crowded in whatever time that I tried to do something. It was just too crowded. And with Universal, you can relax a little bit more. And the other thing is that I'm familiar with more of the properties that Universal has. I mean, being that Jaws is my favorite movie of all time, I'm going to gear toward Universal and Universal properties because of things like that. I couldn't even imagine going to Disney now and dealing with magic bands and all these other things that have just come across. I would get very confused. So I guess it's familiarity with Universal. And something about Universal, other than Disney, is that it's constantly changing. There's always new things to do with each visit that you go to. The last time I went was May of this year, and already there's like 6 new things only like a few months later that I'm looking forward to doing. And it's always evolving, always changing with the times. And it's never the same place twice. There's always new experiences with Universal.
One thing specifically that I can think of right off the bat where Universal just stands above Walt Disney World, and I apologize to the Walt Disney World team that may or may not listen to this, but Universal Orlando Resorts social media team and their guest interaction, whether it in that instance be physical or in the social sphere of things, they are incredible online. The interaction between their fans, making you feel like you matter, is absolutely incredible. There's a couple people that do engagement for Universal, and they do an absolutely fantastic job talking to people, giving Universal Orlando this specific voice that everybody recognizes. It is one of the things that just, I think, highlights Universal Orlando and makes them a world-class act. You see them interact with their guests, be very personable, call them by name, know what they like, share gifts that pertain to them as people and that they think they would like, and they do, and they all get along. It is so great. I really think that compared to Walt Disney World and the interaction they have with their guests, it's a little different. Don't get me wrong, they do a great job as well, but Universal Orlando just really has an above and beyond guest services team, whether that be social or physical. And that's one thing that, at least in my eyes, stands out above Walt Disney World.
So there you go, some very interesting responses. You know, I think Disney always used to be the leader in and I think it still is the leader in customer service, but as far as ground level cast members and team members, I think Universal's starting to edge it a little bit. Now you're starting to see a little bit now why Universal is rising in popularity among guests, but why it's also spawning many deep-rooted fans. And while it doesn't necessarily have the nostalgia of the Magic Kingdom, it certainly has the foundation that makes fans as ardent as those Disney fans. So whereas that die-hard community isn't as big as, say, the Disney one is now, the foundations have been set where in the future I think it will be. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. We'll be back again next week with the final part of this documentary, and we're going to wrap up that documentary with something a little bit more fun, and something that I think will speak to everyone who's a theme park fan who goes on vacations. So please join us next week as we wrap up this look at the Universal Orlando fan community. And I just want to say a big thanks to all the people that have been involved in this. I couldn't do this without them. So for Andy, Craig, Derek, Taylor, Amanda, Danny, Maureen, Tracy, Darren, Hunter, Nina, Travis, Brandon, Mackenzie, Thomas and Trevor, I have been Lee, and we will see you next week for the conclusion.
That's it for another Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. Listen to us on Stitcher, Google Play, and all your podcast apps. Email us with any questions or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com, or even better, record your message at speakpipe.com/uuopodcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest, keyword UUO Podcast. Check out our blog for even more content at uuopodcast.com. Well, that's a wrap. See you next week.